I hope the farm is not here. But yeah, this is something in North Chibarongo area where you can see that farmer has obviously done bush control. If you have a close-up, you can see how dense that Dicrostachys area is coming. And you can actually see how the land used to look before. I mean, if you see the few isolated trees that's there, then you can actually get an idea that the land had some bigger plants before and how the Dicrostachys took over. And then in the right, you can see that the farmer tried to improve. And to my mind, not much of an improvement, but there is a little bit of improvement. So he did it on the left, and then in some years' time, he did it in the right, almost similarly. This is just, we are still going to come back, and we're going to see how build on this photos and so on. Okay, just to start off, I know there's a few points, but I just want to highlight one or two of them. I mean, we know that bush thickening is a problem. And we got to realize when there's a serious number of declines in livestock. And then bush harvesting started with the aim to restore rangelands, and bush value chains were promoted. I mean, I think that if bush didn't have value, we wouldn't have been sitting with these problems that we have now in terms of regrowth. I mean, there's something at the moment something has got value, it tends to get exploited. It is also known that harvesting should be done through selective thinning, but limited specific studies were available in Namibia. I mean, in 1994 already, Prof. Nico Smith found out that there should be selective thinning done. And we in Namibia, we could see that we have got bush encroachment, and we didn't invest in correct harvesting methods specific for Namibia, and we promoted the market for biomass rather than first looking at the correct way of doing things. And then we have got a very generalized harvesting approach was adopted and applied almost all over Namibia. So what I always tell farmers, harvested land, or what I normally tell people, harvested land outside Windhoek shouldn't look the same as harvested land outside Tsumeb, for example. We shouldn't be having these generalized methods of harvesting. Mr. Roseman, there's your answer there on the right. Smaller shrubs should be taken as well, or they should be started with. So what I actually want to say here is, show here is that harvesting methods, be it mechanical, manual, or semi-mechanized, the method is not so much the problem, but the intensity or the rate of removal. That's the problem. Not quite entirely true, because in some cases there's a little bit of soil disturbance, which is not on the other end. So large machinery normally less selective, and manual labor more selective. And then of course, you can see the machine there. It could be selective if you want to, but I mean, if you have to cover on time and do hectareage, then you actually have to drive the machine and cover more hectareage per machine hour. Just to build on this slide, I've actually collected data, and I've actually grouped species. I've grouped them into high wood potential species, which will be your normal species that you harvest for charcoal production, like the acacias, the hardwood species, then protected species, and then the low wood potential species like the sickle bush, grevias, catophractus, and so on. Now, what is very clear here is that the bush roller harvested site that you can see on the previous slide, you can see that there's a very high sapling establishment. And this is about just the first year after harvesting. It's just the first year after harvesting. You can see the high establishment of saplings, which is not the case in the manual harvested site. Then you can also see coppers, bush encroachment, not so much coppers, but manual harvested, a lot of coppers. And that's because of the nice clean cut that you are cutting off your chainsaw, and you are encouraging coppers of that, whereas the bush roller is crushing the plants and cannot really coppers that much. And that you can basically see. If you look at the picture on the side, it is actually crushing the big plants nicely, and then they hardly coppers. But in order to avoid a lot of soil disturbance, I actually spoke to the owner of the machine, or the company that operated that machine, and they told me that they are slightly lifting the roller to avoid a lot of soil disturbance. And that again is another influence. I'm not sure if you can see that picture very well, because it is nicely killing the big plants, and then it kindly roll over the small, younger, flexible plants. So these plants, the machine is passing over, and they just simply bend back because of their so flexible stems, and they just regrow again. Just to continue, actually these Nagalia or Acacia melliferae and Rufficians, acacias, they're actually not that bad as we think, because they have got such low survival rates in terms of regrowth. I've actually taken a sample size of 20 of each, both bush roller and chainsaw, and I could actually see that their survival rate is actually quite low in terms of them surviving. This is now 3 years. So sometimes they kind of coppers, the year after, coppers die back and so on. And this is regardless of rainfall. Like there at the bottom, you can see the rainfall. So it might look like that. In a bad year, a farmer can actually, looking at the rainfall, in a bad year, a farmer can actually invest in controlling bush, knowing that it might not coppers a lot after that, even if the rainfall improves. And then you can actually reap the benefits later. That is what it looks like to me. I'm not saying it is the case. Just to move forward. Now let's just compare non-selective harvesting versus selective harvesting, so that you just see in terms of the results that I've gathered, how this is working out for you in terms of doing the right thing. Now let's look at non-selective harvesting, 2017, and then 3 years later. You can actually see there's quite significant grass in the so-called bush encroached area. And then you can also see roughly more or less the same amount of grass 3 years after it was harvested. But now you have lost the big trees. Some very specific statistics. You can see actually just 3 years after, the plant specter has exceeded the original plant specter. And that is what Prof. Nico have showed you. If you remove one big tree, these small ones that we're waiting for, they're actually taking up that space. So one is being replaced by many of them. And then you can see the ETTs per hectare. It is quickly catching up. And in the next slide, ETT per hectare, our ETT is evapotranspiration tree equivalent. And that is a way of how we quantify woody density. It is a 1.5 meter plant with a canopy volume of about 500 cubic centimeters. So in a big tree, there will be quite a number of ETTs, and it's not plants per hectare as such, but ETTs per hectare. So you can now see that ETTs are catching up quite, and in the next slide, we will see when the ETTs are actually reaching where it should be. And then you can see that the wood mass, I don't think it will ever get there where it was before. And even if you see the picture, and we are going to get to why the wood mass is not going to get there where it was before in the slide after this one. Now, thanks, Dr. Cornelis, you have made me aware of some book that I could use to do population growth or population dynamic modeling. And what's happening here is that the green line there on top, that is where the wood biomass was. At 7,252 ETTs, we had about 15 tons of wood. And it was harvested non-selectively. And I used basically 3 years of regrowth to get this modeling going on. So an input of 3 years, how it reacted, I could use that data of 3 years to see how the modeling can predict where it will end up. So I could see that in about 9 to 12 years, the ETT can get back to where you want it to be, which would be 4,500 ETTs in this area. Normally, we use the why 4,500 ETTs. Normally, we use that rule of thumb of the number of ETTs should not exceed 10 times the long-term average rainfall. And that is a general guideline of determining whether land is bush encroached or not. So depending on your rainfall, if ETTs exceed 10 times the long-term average rainfall, you are getting bush encroached. If it's less than that, then you are not bush encroached. And that's how we know in the first place whether we are bush encroached or not. I'm not sure if I mean, a lot of people, they look at a bush and they see there's a lot of bush. They decide we are bush encroached, and maybe they are not bush encroached. So there is some guideline that you actually should be using for determining whether you're bush encroached or not. So then that has been explained. So we can actually now see that we know that we will never be getting to 15 tons, but the ETTs was also high. It was supposed to be 4,500 for that specific area because of the rainfall that was 450 millimeters. So we could now see that on a 4,500 ETT, our wood is supposed to be 8.6 tons. And now we did the modeling and we could see not even trying to get to where we want to it was. If we had to have 4,500 ETTs, how much wood? And that should have been 8 tons, 8.6 tons. And that took us well around close to almost over 60 years to get there, not even trying to achieve the 15 tons. Now some backing on this. If you don't believe this, there's some backing on this. And here you can see that this is caused by a few slides back. We could see that the bigger trees were replaced by bush. And we can see that we are not getting the wood back that was originally there, and we're also not getting the wood that should be there. We're only going to get it around 60 years. Now let's look at this. We can see that normal encroached areas, which has been never been harvested before, that encroachment took place over decades. Then we can see that in the slide that I showed you earlier, the 3 years after, there's also encroachment, but now from a different species. So we can see that the high wood potential species, they were the dominant. This is non-selective harvesting that took place. Everything was taken. And what grew back was the low wood potential species, the shrubby stuff, the grevias, the Cataphractus alexandri, the sickle bush and so. So this actually backs up that the wood is not coming back and that it takes you so long, about 60 years for you to get some sort of wood ever again. So let us just look at the other side, selective, the benefits of selective or sustainable bush control. You are retaining plants during the harvesting process that can go bigger due to increased resource availability. Prof. Nikusmat has also said on that. The retained plants can suppress the regrowth of others, maintaining an open savanna, and then grass production increases and available fodder in a better quality. And then biodiversity is also improved. Now let's look at this. This is an area that was encroached. And right after harvesting, I took a photo. And then there's a lot of figures around it. You can see the pre-harvest stuff is on top there. It was 7,884, 6,784. And we brought it down to 4,500 because of that rainfall area that had 450 millimeters. And we are using the rule of thumb of ETT should not exceed 10 times the long-term average rainfall. And of that, we actually retained 3.3 tons of wood. Now, just 3 years after, we actually had an increase in ETTE of about 1,100 and a wood increase of about 2.8 tons. So if you have to put, and there's also the added benefit of grass. So if you have to put things together at the bottom, the total above ground biomass pre-harvest is what we had there. And then the total gain, because you have retained, plus you are gaining grass, and you are gaining extra wood to 2.8 tons. Then you're actually just a shortfall of 265 kilogram dry material per hectare. That's over 3 years. And this is what I see as sustainable wood harvesting. That's should you want to go the sustainable way. But normally this is not how a harvester leaves the land. Actually, this is when they actually just start harvesting on a piece of land. So this is, if there's something that you can take home, it's most probably this one. You can also see that the plants that are being removed, like that one there, is most probably the same size of that tree, and it's being replaced there by a low potential species. But you don't see the creeping in of a lot of low potential species. You see grass coming back. Now, looking at more data, which is a little bit more worrisome, although there's good news, is that if you bring it back to the 4,500 ATTEs, that's what we did. We started off with the low potential species. We didn't touch the protected species, and we topped it off with the high wood potential species. Harvested there, a lot of biomass left, or ETTEs left. And then 3 years after harvesting, this is now the selectively harvested plot, we could see that there is that regrowth that we talked about. And we can see that the low wood potential species, they grew back by just as much as they were. So which means every time you actually harvesting for charcoal production, you will have to cut the smaller bush as well, even though you're not going to need them. So this is just what this is showing us. I know the harvesters and charcoal producers don't like this, to hear this, but it's actually just the reality that I have here for you in terms of data that I've collected. What else is there that I wanted to say? No. This is at Harmony Estate. When I was still working at the Ministry of Environment, they called us and they said that the estate is a bit bush encroached. And we went there and we actually find that most of it doesn't have a bush encroachment problem. And we can see that in area C, the most open area has got, if you look on the right, has got the highest biomass. If you look at area C, it has got the highest biomass there at the bottom. And that's because of the bigger trees and nicely spaced trees. And we didn't measure the grass, but there was also significant more grass. Area B and C, more shrubby areas, more thickened, but lower biomass, those areas. So, selective sustainable bush control. Thinning is advocated, as we spoke before. The question regarding the ideal number of trees that should be retained is complex and is influenced by many considerations. That's why we don't actually know when an area is bush encroached or not. We actually judge an area by the eye, and we should be actually having some assessments done to see if the area is really encroached or not. Because a lot of times we didn't receive enough rainfall, and then we see bush, and then we see, okay, yeah, bush is the problem. Whereas actually the problem was the rainfall, there wasn't enough for that specific year. And then the biomass quantification tool is there that can calculate woody plant removal and biomass offtake. And the best way is to seek guidance in terms of harvesting bush. So another take home is we don't know what bush encroachment is, so we should be first doing assessments to determine whether we are bush encroached or not. Now, looking at this one, this is now very general. I told you about the rainfall ETTE relationship. So you have seen that photo before. That photo was in the thornbush savanna, but in a 400 to 450 rainfall zone. So this is how this should be looking like. And if you continue that rainfall zone, even if you're going into another veld type, that's actually how it should be more or less looking like. Of course, there are some other considerations like soil type and so on. More sandy soils retain more plants for nutrient cycling and so on. And this is normally how it should be looking like in a 300 to 350 rainfall zone. And this one was in the Commas, which is in the highland savanna. And if you move to the east or upwards, I think it should also be looking like that. And another take home is that harvested areas in different areas shouldn't be looking the same. We shouldn't be having these generalized methods of harvesting. It should be more of a science and more some accurate removal of tree equivalents. Another one that you might find surprising, and I also found it surprising, is that, the reason why we do bush control is to have a Bayesian response. So what I could see in a specific year or over 3 years, I've put data together, and I could see that the control, the non-selective harvesting, and the selective thinning. There were not significant difference in grass response. And I was thinking, let me look at the rainfall. And I could see those differences in the rainfall that you can see the bottom there. And then I actually separated it. I decided, let me go by year. And I could see that lower rainfall, low, and I've put the data again together there because I didn't find significant differences here. And I could actually see that it was rainfall driven. But still, I didn't understand why. So I looked at species groupings or functional groups, and I grouped them into annuals, herbs, and perennials. And I could see that, not that I could see, to tell you, to prove to you, that most of it were annuals. So it looks like if veld is in an annual state, then it's more rainfall driven as opposed to bush removal. It looks like that. I know we could have separated this in the different years, and we could have also separated that and bring in the different treatments in there as well over the years, and also the different treatments there. But in overall, this is just in a nutshell that. And for me, having collected the data, it wasn't a surprise to me. I mean, I just had to find a way to tell it to you. That's why I'm using the stats here. So, and actually, this area is actually still in an annual state, in an annual grass dominant state. And I don't know when it's going to move to a perennial state. And that comes back to the parts of Ben when he was asked how do you introduce more perennial plants, and something is to be done here because the perennial plants might have been lost or a great deal of the seed bank is not there anymore. Okay, coming closer. It may seem if charcoal harvesters are harvesting to realize an offtake which is economically viable for the harvesting process. It's just what I think. So I hope I'm wrong on this one. There are also very few farms where harvesting was done with the aim to restore rangelands while producing charcoal. I mean, if people come for a permit, they come for a charcoal permit, and nobody comes for a rangeland restoration permit. I'm not saying everybody is doing that, but I mean, not a lot of people are removing bush for the pure sake of rangeland restoration. And I also understand it's an expensive process just to remove bush for the sake of that. But I mean, it's either now or I don't know, guys. There are even fewer farms where bush control is purely done for restoration. And it seems that the woodchip harvesting is the next income stream from previously harvested land. Now, you know, when I just started my presentation, that very dense sickle bush encroach area, that is now ideal for woodchip because for woodchip you are chipping it up. But then again, it is also again done non-selectively. And then if you have to look at the time that you have been harvesting and the time that the biomass is there to have a economically viable harvest again, the difference, that growth, the bush is there, the bush is becoming bigger, you have to wait, and you are losing out on livestock production in that time. Because, I mean, people are saying, okay, fine, encroach, sickle bush, woodchip industry. But now, from where it was harvested before until it's ready again for the next harvest, it takes time, and in that time, you're losing out on livestock production. Here, I actually forgot what I wanted to say here. The island savanna. Okay, this photo was taken in Krumuk on the other side of the river. And it looks like as if Catophractus alexandri is becoming more and more and more there, the other side. And I understand that there are also frequent burns on that side. And I know that Catophractus alexandri, if you had a fire over them, it's like giving them fertilizer. They like growing in burned areas. So the more burning that takes place, especially in this area, more Catophractus can move in, and a lot of Senegalia mellifera that we actually want, or Acacia mellifera that we actually want. It's the first time that we actually want Acacia mellifera on our land. And then the photo on the right, This was a farmer that applied for charcoal harvesting. And luckily in that days, I was still working for the Ministry of Environment, and there was a training going on the biomass quantification tool. So this farm was there for training, and the farmer wanted to do charcoal. Can you see the possibility of doing charcoal there? He should be actually removing the bush. And I asked the farmer, so are you going to do charcoal? He said, there's trees there. So he's going to just take those few more isolated trees that was left. The assessment. So just in conclusion, we know that thinning was saying they've done. And it should not be generalized, and we should be moving more to the way of doing thinning from mechanical removal. And there are some times that you don't have to do bush control to make an income for the short term, but rather for improved grazing capacities in the long term. And there actually is a way of doing that, and that's the way that I showed you of the two pictures and a lot of figures around the pictures. So there is a way. It's just that it's not being done. And then to seek advice on how to do it right. And with that, I'm saying thank you.
Jerome, thank you so much. Final question or two for Jerome. Someone? Here we go, Tangeni.
Just on the last point about seeking advice. I have several friends who are farming and they do the bush clearing from the way I now understand it, the unsustainable way. So how easily is it to find this advice and where do I send them to? Who do I send them to? To you? As in, where is this resource so that they can easily find it so that I don't.
Cornelis, can you help me with this one? I don't want to say I'm one of them. Cornelis and Perivoli are the right people, and they will contact, Perivoli will contact me again, and I will give them advice on how to do it, and you will work through them. Yeah, normally it involves an assessment to be done, and once you have done an assessment in the area, you'll have a broad idea of how it should be looking like. And how it should be looking like, that is the idea of normally what I've done it on Majene, because there was some harvested on Majene. And I wanted an area to show in some time after that it was correctly harvested. What I did there is I did an assessment, and I kind of had a 50 by 50 meter small area, and I practically or physically measure the trees, and I said remove this one, remove that one, leave that one, and so on a small area. And then you actually show the harvesters or the guys doing the harvesting. This is what the area should look like after it has been harvested. And that is what I've done in that picture that I've showed you there. And then the guys, they actually grab it very easily because you tell them how it should be looking like, and that's how they will proceed with the rest of the farm in terms of harvesting. So yeah, to answer your question, there is advice. Just don't generalize. And if you see there's a little bit too much wood or bush left, and the person that is giving you the technical advice is saying this is how it looked like, rather believe the person. You can always come back and come reharvest again after some years.